Good morning, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here to talk to you about my recently published book, the RIBA Climate Guide. Really happy to see many of you join this session. It's really an honor to be here to present you the first book in the world that contextualizes the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030 and really identifies the fundamentals of knowledge and skills as part of the core competence of the professionals across the built environment sector. But before I provide you with an overview to the RIBA Climate Guide, I would like to briefly introduce myself and also contextualize this material by talking a little bit about the Climate Framework Initiative, which this book is structured around. I'm an architect and environmental engineer. On my day job, the Sustainability Director at the Global Design Practice of Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. And to nurture my passion and scale my impact, currently wearing multiple hats in various industry-wide and academic organizations, some of which you see here, because I'm really passionate about scaling my impact. And I really believe in the collective action to make a meaningful change. And I also have been privileged enough to be recognized as one of the 100 most influential global climate leaders by the Time magazine in their latest issue, which is giving a platform to voice the subject matter across different parts of the sector and across different sectors around the world. As I mentioned before, I would like to start briefly giving you an overview to the Climate Framework Initiative, which is really an initiative that has been established over 4 years ago as a voluntary effort to define standards of knowledge and define a framework for building knowledge upon. And the structure of the Climate Framework is what is used to define the chapters of the RIBA Climate Guide, so it's very relevant. This initiative, as I mentioned before, established 4 years ago as an international interdisciplinary effort and a voluntary effort with the aim to address the impacts, both direct and indirect impacts that we do with the work we do across the sector against the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, and specifically identifying those goals that can be impacted with the work we do. And the initiative's main aim is to really break down the industry's existing silos by cross-pollinating experiences and expertise across different supply and value chain parts of the sector, and bringing all the key decision makers together to really find a consensus of what the climate knowledge and what the climate language should be like, so we all understand each other. And in this process, we have been able to create a community, a global community, which currently has over 1,700 members around 26 different countries. So it's a platform of networking and a platform for exchange knowledge and expertise and experiences around the subject matters related to climate change. The second aim of this initiative is to really create a thread of knowledge, weave through between academia and industry to really align expectations and to build the fundamentals of knowledge that needs to be carried out from the beginning of early ages of any built environment actor, whether you be a designer, a regulator, a policymaker, a contractor, a developer, name it, and also to ensure that there is this continuous exchange between industry and academia so that knowledge is continuously disseminated in the way that it should be. And under this initiative, we're bringing also the generations together because it's really important to upskill, reskill, and build our industry's collective capacity starting from young age and also continuing all the way. And in this way, we're able to close feedback loops by bringing the know-hows of an industry into the next generation's core education, but also bring the best academic research into the industry where the industry is continuously in need of innovation. So how does the climate framework look like? The taxonomy and the structure that we have created as part of this initiative, the same named initiative. The framework contextualizes the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, as I mentioned before, within the built environment landscape. And it specifically looks at 6 overarching themes that you can see here in colorful bubbles and images. And these themes and their sub-themes, it goes into further granularity to really explain the depth and the richness of all of these overarching themes. And it tries to cover different disciplines because, as I mentioned before, this is an interdisciplinary knowledge building case. It covers disciplines of interior design, architecture, engineering of any kind, and it really identifies these topics in the context of different scales. that built environment actors have an impact on, from individual buildings to cities as well as regions. And in the initiative, when we first started, we really acknowledged there is a need of a holistic knowledge base, not just focusing on energy and carbon, which the industry's focus has been rightfully over the last few years, but really understanding how we can address the multitude of topics, which are a multitude of priorities when we look at the vast umbrella of climate change, and look at it both at the individual buildings, but also as well as city scale, because there's a need of a systemic change that needs to happen. So the Climate Framework Initiative took over 2 years in formulating its set of topics. And we've done a global consultation where over 900 people responded, and I would say scrutinized every letter on every word that there is currently presented on the framework. And it was really important for us to do this global consultation, because eventually what we have done is to create a consensus that these are the topics that everyone should be upskilled, reskilled, and trained upon, whether they're in academia or in industry. And this is also demonstrated in the tremendous support we have received to this initiative to date by over 130 organizations around the globe. And throughout these years, RIBA became the first professional institute and organization to adopt the climate framework and take this framework that we've created to define their climate literacy mandatory competence requirements, as they call them, and they are presented currently on the screen on their knowledge schedule that you can see here. And these are the set of the topics that are included within the RIBA Climate Guide, and also these are the set of topics that RIBA will be requiring its members to pass an exam on to demonstrate their competence on these subject matters in early 2025. And subsequently, the RIBA Climate Guide was commissioned by the RIBA Publishing to provide guidance on these holistic topics, and to do that for all the built environment professionals, as well as to those teaching in academia. It's important to note that this book is meant for everyone across the built environment sector, every key decision maker, including policymakers, architects, engineers, and not just architects and not those practicing alone in the UK. It's meant for an international audience because the challenge of climate change is very much owned by every single one of us. And because also when we talk about creating harmony between the built and the natural environment, between people's well-being and planet's health and well-being, I mentioned before, every segment of the built environment sector's supply and value chains need to be actioning effectively and consistently, because there is a systemic change that needs to occur, and it must occur at all scales. Considering this, RIBA Climate Guide really aims to bring all of these topics together, contextualize the UN SDGs under various chapters as it relates to the built environment landscape. And it does so by becoming this common place, a single source. Because initially, before I start writing this book, I've done a lot of research, market research around the world. And there are amazing work that is done by many other subject matter experts. And I'm by no means an expert on all of these topics. But there's all this wonderful work that sits in isolation in single books or in single documents, and they're not very accessible, or many people are not aware of them. And it was important to bring all of this knowledge in one place, and that's essentially what the RIBA Climate Guide is doing, is signposting to all this amazing work that has been done by many other experts around the world, but making it in a very accessible and hopefully easy to understand manner with the simple language that it uses. And also with its direct alignment to the climate framework's taxonomy and the simple language it uses also with the taxonomy, it really aims to create this consistent way of communicating across the built environment sector when we talk about this very technical often and complex world of climate change. And finally, it needs to, and it aims to highlight these interlinkages that exist between these different topics. I talked about this wonderful work that exists by others out there, but these work often, they focus on sole topics of, for example, circular economy or energy and carbon or ecology or biophilic design. But there isn't a book that actually tries to bring all of this together and highlights the importance of how designing a net zero carbon building will have an impact on ecology or will have an impact on people's health and well-being. And in this book, I try to do that. I try to signpost to these different chapters and make sure that when you're making a decision about, let's say, delivering a net zero carbon building, you're aware that your decision may have an impact on ecology and may have an impact on people's health and well-being. And structure around the climate frameworks topics, specifically taking its overarching 6 themes to define its 6 chapters. The RIBA Climate Guide also has 2 introductory chapters in the book. The first of which specifically looks at the global and the built environment climate landscape and the fundamentals, which maps out the essential background knowledge around global research, policies, commitments, roadmaps that relate to climate change. And it then takes this broader knowledge around the globe and this climate science knowledge and makes it relevant to the built environment landscape within the next chapter of sustainable outcomes and common threads. And this chapter covers crucial topics of retrofit, outcome-based design, climate justice or disaster risk resilience, among others, procurement, life cycle costing, they're all included within this chapter. And it was really important for me to highlight these important topics, as I call them common threads, at the very beginning of the book, but also talk about them throughout different sections and the chapters of the book from that particular perspective. So for example, there is an introduction given to retrofit in this chapter, but then retrofit is also talked about again under human factors chapter, where I emphasize health and well-being. And it talks about how buildings need to be retrofitted to enhance people's health and well-being. Or retrofit is again talked about in the 3rd chapter, where I talk about energy and carbon. So it talks about how can we retrofit existing buildings to be net zero carbon, for example. So the same topic appears again and again in different chapters from different perspectives. And at the heart of the RIBA Climate Guide is these 6 overarching themes, which I call the 6 main chapters. And these chapters really provide a high-level knowledge around concepts which we must all embrace and consider in our day-to-day work. The first one of these is human factors, which covers subjects in relation to people, their health and well-being, and also the built environment can have on people's health and well-being, and behavior and lifestyle, of course. It also touches upon topics of social value or community building and just transition in the context of climate change. And you'll see a couple of images from the various case studies that are included within the book, that the book really gives a theory-based knowledge, but also tries to contextualize that theory-based knowledge in real-life applications of case studies from around the world. The next chapter focused on circular economy, specifically looking at resources, their use, management, maintenance, and procurement to really encourage circularity at all aspects of a built environment's life and to promote endless recycling and reuse if possible. The next chapter focuses on energy and carbon. It brings this topic at the forefront of the discussion by really explaining what decarbonization means and by offering guidance on how to minimize energy use as well as whole life carbon emissions throughout the life of a built environment project. And it does so again by giving examples from real life built projects around the world. The next chapter is called water, and this chapter focuses on water use, harvesting and recycling, as well as climate change's impacts on natural water bodies and water availability around the world. The subsequent chapter covers ecology and biodiversity. It emphasizes the importance of finding a balance between the natural built and environment and also people, by focusing on efficient land use, nature-based solutions, and sustainable food production, among others. There's a great example, which is one of my favorites in the book, of this urban farming initiative in Detroit, Michigan, that talks about how we can bring food production to our cities, which is going to be essential, much more essential moving forward. The last chapter focuses on connectivity and transport, addressing the urban scale side of the equation and really placing importance on how people connect with one another from places, from buildings, regions, and cities. And in honesty, this was the most difficult chapter for me to write because there is very limited information out there around sustainable connectivity and transport. And I thought it was really important to include this because we may be designing and delivering amazing sustainable buildings, but in buildings alone themselves are not going to really make the difference. Of course, we should definitely do them, but it's important to talk about the ecosystem of cities when we talk about the systemic change that is needed. And this chapter really tries to bring that forefront to the discussion. And it does so through highlighting active travel and other future sustainable means of transport in addition to the ones that we currently have. There are 5 sub-chapters in each chapter, and the book, because the book tries to cover so many topics, and it's a lot of content to get through, and in order to make it digestible, it had to use a simple language, and it needs to be very easy to navigate. So there was a lot of emphasis in the design of the overall structure of the book, including the graphics. And every chapter has 5 sub-chapters that really highlight these interlinked topics and give depth of each of these overarching topics. And some of these topics' impacts are felt today, whereas others may be felt in time. That's why it's really important to continuously have this consciousness about some other topics, even if they may not be of priority today. And this is the reason why the RIBA Climate Guide brings all of these topics together in this one single book, and in the manner it does. And it also tries to explain some of these very complex, sometimes technical knowledge in very simple graphics, so that people hopefully can relate and can understand this very complex knowledge. With full-page illustrations that are included in each sub-chapter, that describe some of the high-level strategies that built environment actors could consider in their day-to-day work. And in the legend, you'll see there is an explanation of that strategy. And in each sub-chapter also there is a case study, which really brings that theory and research-based knowledge in a real-life context. By sharing key information and data on projects, and explaining how some of the practices and sort of organizations around the world have really tried to actively embrace these topics in their day-to-day work. There were over 100 case studies. This is one of the questions I get often. Why these 30 case studies that are currently included in the book? There were over 100 case studies that I researched and evaluated over a 7-month period before I started writing this book. And there is amazing work out there, but there is not enough published data. And the case studies that are currently included in the book are the ones that had reliable published public data on these subject matters. And also it's important to highlight that it was difficult perhaps at first to really identify which case study to put in which chapter, but there were some evident ones that were very deliberately describing how that subject matter, let's say net zero carbon, is exemplified in a built project. Of course, the case studies touch upon different topics, hence they're emphasized in their description in the book. And as more data hopefully becomes available, I'm hopeful that in the future editions of the book there can be more case studies included from around the world at different scales. And if you have any case studies, please get in touch with me because I'm really eager to find more. And the case studies that are currently included within the book represent 26 different countries around the world with supporting reference information from North Africa, Middle East, Central Asia, and India, which are the regions that currently do not have any case studies due to lack of data in the book. And recognized by the RIBA Publishing to be the most heavily referenced book they have published to date. As I mentioned before, it was really important to bring other people into this journey with me. And even though I'm the author, there are many amazing authors and subject matter experts around there. So there are 21 pages of references that the book has, including over 460 definitions, over 46 pages included. And I have written all these definitions myself because it was important to bring everyone's sort of definitions into this common language that I've been trying to create with this book. And hopefully it does justice to all the amazing work that is being done by others. So to conclude, I would like to say thank you for listening to me today. And I really hope if you get a chance to get the book, which you can purchase at the RIBA's bookshop by the Future Build Conference Arena area. I hope you will find it as a valuable resource to help inform your day-to-day decisions and that you can help disseminate the knowledge that the book contains. Thank you very much. And I wanted to perhaps open the floor to questions if anyone has any questions. Please, I think there'll be a mic turning around. And I also want to take all of your 5 minutes before to answer a poll at the end of the session. Thank you.
Hi, Mina. Thank you. Thanks for the fascinating talk. That was very useful and informative. Is there much crossover between the content on the UN SDG website in terms of the case studies from your book and on the website? Are there any of the case studies on the actual website, or vice versa, you've got those into your book as well?
There are. That's a great question. And that was my starting point. Actually, I looked at the UN SDGs website for the case studies when I first started because it was important for me to acknowledge the work that has been done before me. And there are some case studies included within the book that are from the UN SDGs website. But on the UN SDGs, not all the cases have data. And I wanted to make sure that there is data included, like in terms of U values of the buildings or in terms of hectares of land and people were able to harvest for food. And so that kind of data does not exist in all the case studies included. And that's why I've went out and done a 7-month research to try to find others which are currently included in the book. But thank you.
Great, thank you.
Gentleman here.
As a fellow researcher, I'm interested in sustainable goals from a point of view of reliability and engineering and the energy and the circular economy in relation to that. Can you help us understand what that means from your point of view and what your understanding and your research has shown in that space?
Of course, and there is an entire section dedicated in the chapter of the book called Circular Economy that really emphasizes and looks at circular economy not in the way that we can address it in our day-to-day work as a designers, for example, by choosing materials that can promote or construction techniques that can promote circular economy, but also it talks about from an economic perspective and the implications of those decisions on the society, because I also emphasize a lot of just transition and economic prosperity, which are the fundamentals of the sort of the 3 legs of the stool, if I can describe it that way, of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I think immediately the first and foremost thought that comes to my mind that is also exemplified in some of the case studies is the need to really tie in all these aspects together and to talk about how the choice of materials, let alone they should not be, for example, considered not only from a sustainability perspective but also from a procurement perspective, how they impact whether they're ethically and responsibly sourced so that they impact the societies that they're coming from. And thirdly, how throughout this journey, the economic implications of the extraction, for example, of materials and the manufacturing of those materials, and also how they come to the construction site, how they impact the economies along the value chain of the built environment sector is really need to be very well considered as almost like a mathematical equation to ensure that there is a prosper economic solution that is also generated as part of the design or the built environment that is being constructed.
I understand there's a lot of information there, and as a researcher as well, do you see AI pulling this all information all together and then having an AR model versus your current model, so A plus B equals Y, so you'll have AI compare this model to your built model, say you're going to build a building and compare that and then give you an answer as to where you're at in terms of your current goals? I do hope. I'm very optimistic about technology. I should say that cautiously. I'm very optimistic about technology, and I think AI is going to help us optimize our processes throughout the entire supply and value chains of the built environment sector. And collecting data is going to be a key. It's going to unlock this sort of. Right now, it's a closed box, I see it, because it's very impossible to get data and impossible to get a data that you can compare against each other. The same building, if it's done by one person or another, the same sort of carbon assessment, for example, may look very different for the same design. So hopefully it will bring consistency in the way that data is obtained, and it can also be compared against each other. But on the side, I say that cautiously, because even though that optimization efficiency will be brought by technology and AI in the near future, and it's already coming in place, it's still really important for people to have the knowledge and to build the experience around these topics, so that when they're looking at data or something that is generated by technology or technological equipment, they can sort of help make more informed decisions, not just by looking at numbers, but by also building on their experiences. So that, for example, a number may look great from a carbon perspective, I'm going to give that example, through an AI-generated model, but a human intervention is very much needed to be able to help
make sure that that decision of, that option A is better than option B is done in a way that it does not create an unintended consequence in other areas. So from a carbon perspective, a number may look great, so AI is going to generate that figure, but we need to be aware that that decision may also, that good number in carbon may actually make an impact on people's health and well-being. So, and that's where the human intervention will need to come, hence the book and trying to cover all these topics.
It's very true what you say. You cannot be effective with what you do not understand. So
Exactly.
there's still a long way to go,
Exactly.
and appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. So I don't know if there are any other questions. I'm more than happy to answer them afterwards too. But if I could briefly ask you to scan this QR code. It's a very simple question, and this is selfishly an insight I want to get for the future editions of the book. Which of the overarching themes you would like to acquire more knowledge on? Which are the themes that you would like to see more case studies on, or more sort of talked about, and hopefully that can help inform the future editions of the book and other sort of training sessions that RIBA and others may be doing. And I think the question is going to ask you to rank them. So all the topics are still going to be included, but which ones is the ones that you think there is a greater lack of knowledge and skills, either within yourselves, within your practices, and across the sector and academia. And I'm not able to show this live, but I can see it on my screen, so I'll reveal the results. I'll give you another minute or so. Perfect. So far, the order is connectivity and transport, which I think is not a surprise because that's the chapter that I had the most struggle with. The second one is water. The third one is ecology and biodiversity. The fourth one is human factors. The sixth one is energy and carbon. So I think because there is so much on energy and carbon over the years, that people believe that perhaps other topics may need more airtime nowadays. But thank you so much for listening to me today, and I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I hope I get a chance to see you by the RIBA bookshop where I'll be doing a book signing as well. Thank you.